Joel Klatt of Fox Sports came out and said that he had heard that LSU is willing and planning to give Lane Kiffin a quote-unquote blank check along with the University of Ole Miss. So that clearly is going to spark LSU fans because over the last couple of weeks, it has been a lot of chaos. This is the first real time that from a national perspective that someone has come out there and given some quote-unquote sourcing about what they're hearing. Now, I will give Joel Klatt this. I don't give him a lot. I disagree with a lot of his opinions a lot of times when it comes to football. But there are a lot of people that are from around here that have moved to the West Coast, have businesses on the West Coast, very, how do I want to say this? Very wealthy businesses on the West Coast who do know Joel Klatt very well. Like I'll give an example. A buddy of mine owns a business in the West Coast part of the United States. And we were talking the other day and he's like, yeah, I was talking to, Joel Klatt. There are people that have a lot of LSU ties that do speak and know Joel Klatt. Regardless of all of that, he did come out today and, quote, say that he had been hearing that LSU is willing to give Lane Kiffin, the current sitting Ole Miss head coach, a blank check. And he said also Ole Miss is going to do the same. So let's break that down. Let's start with Ole Miss for just a quick second. Ole Miss cannot give Lane Kiffin a quote-unquote blank check. You're right, Blake. They don't have the infrastructure that we do. No. I don't know if they could give an ultimate quote-unquote blank check when it comes to NIL. Now, Ole Miss has a lot of money. Guys, regardless if you want to debate or argue that, look what they've done in the portal. I mean, regardless of what you want to say, think, believe, they have spent over the last 3 years a hell of a lot of money in the portal. They have done a really good job at that. Look at the defensive line that they had a season ago. Look what they did in the portal this year, being the top 3 portal class in the country, yet again, from all the money that they've spent. You went and got Austin Thomas back from Ole Miss when he had been here a couple times because of the money that he raised and the guys that they went out there and got for Ole Miss a season ago. Now, Joel stated that Ole Miss is willing to give a blank check. I agree with him on one thing, and I'm assuming that Ole Miss will do everything that they can to keep Lane Kiffin. Why wouldn't they? They have had more success under him than anybody that they've had historically. Lane is the only head coach in Ole Miss history to have 10 wins in the regular season ever. Now, they have, had success all the way back to the days of Billy Cannon, but the only coach at the University of Mississippi that's won 10 regular season games in the history of their program has been Holmst. It's been Lane Kiffin. Now, I don't believe the story of the blank check in this regard when it comes to Ole Miss. In the state of Mississippi, the way that I understand it will be proven wrong if I am given anything else. But as I see it, you can only have a length of contract that is only 4 years long. In Lane's contract, if he wins 7 games, it rolls over to the next year. So meaning since he's won 7 games, his contract will roll over yet again. But a contract cannot exceed longer than 4 years. Then you're not giving a blank check. Meaning if you're going to give him guaranteed money, say you give him 4 years, $15 million a year, well, that's great. But you're not giving him the blank check that LSU can ultimately give him, pretty much like what you just did for Brian Kelly. Pretty much what Florida is more than likely going to do also for Lane Kiffin. So I think that it's we need to start off in the baseline of, are they going to do everything humanly possible? Like, if the numbers are realistic, and I don't know if these numbers are realistic or not, but if you remember back in 2021, when things around the middle of November, which we talked about on Monday, Jake Crane of Crane & Company came out and said, listen, I'm hearing contracts for guys like Lincoln Riley are going for 10 years, 95 to 100 million. Jake Crane wasn't wrong, right? Like Jake Crane was not wrong in the sense of what Brian Kelly got at LSU, what Lincoln Riley got at USC. He wasn't wrong. The contracts were right. So now the sentiment or the rumor or the thought is that Lane Kiffin would go for about $15 to about $16 million a year, from 14.5 to 16 million. I do think Ole Miss would match that. Now, before you say, Blake, that's a lot of money for a head coach, guys, you better go look at NFL contracts. You better go look, like you could Google right now, like what does Andy Reid make? I think it's somewhere close to 18 to 20 million. Sean Payton makes 18 million. Like, it's the world that these guys live in. Lane Kiffin is the hottest commodity right now, more than likely on planet Earth. He is the prom queen. Everybody wants to date the prom queen. Everybody wants to go after the prom queen. But if that is the number, to me, just speculating based off of what I know of what Ole Miss, unless they changed it, and again, I could be wrong, but this is how I understand it, they cannot exceed a contract in the state of Mississippi past the 4-year marker. So the guaranteed money from an LSU or a Florida is going to massively exceed that, or even from the Giants. So I'm not trying to discredit what Joel Klatt said. So it comes off as me coming out here and saying, hey, man, Joel Klatt said this, and the first part of it, when he talks about Ole Miss, I don't believe it. I do believe it, but I don't think that it is the equality of what LSU and Florida are going to do. Now, here's what things that I have heard. Things behind the scenes earlier in the week for LSU have not gone the way that maybe they anticipated. That there has been some pushback based off of the chaos that has been circling around. Is Verge Alsbury going to be your permanent AD? Is the governor going to be massively involved? What is the board of supervisors situation here? Are they the ones making the hire? Since that has happened, I think LSU has gotten themselves in a situation where, hey, now you got to go for broke. Because I do fully believe that there is interest with Lane Kiffin and full interest when it comes to LSU wanting Lane Kiffin. Every single time that we have come out here and done this coaching carousel talk, for whatever it's worth, I've always stated, yeah, let's talk about what happens if it's not Lane Kiffin. And that is how we've started off each one of these segments. If you ask me, from an opinion standpoint, if you gave me the full autonomy to hire the next head coach of LSU, I'm going for broke with Lane Kiffin. That is my opinion. I think he does recruit very well. I think that he cannot recruit from a high school ranks perspective in Mississippi because he doesn't have the infrastructure. He doesn't have the willing fan base to pay a kid massive amounts of money out of high school. I don't think that he does have the in-state talent, and I do think that he ultimately believes to himself and says to himself, can I win a national title at Ole Miss? Now, the thing with Lane that a lot of these other coaches do have, or don't have, is Lane to some extent has already gotten over the hump. Last year, Lane Kiffin beat Georgia at home, something that he had not been able to do. He hadn't been able to get over that hump of the Alabamas or Georgias of the world. This year, he goes on the road, and they completely dominate Oklahoma with a team that a lot of people thought that did not and would not and had not returned the talent that they did a season ago. And guys, they're staring the playoffs right in the face. And he's going for another 10-win season 3 out of the last 4 years, which is highly impressive, not only anywhere, but especially at Ole Miss. The things that I have always heard in the consistency of what you and I have talked about, guys, he's going to be the top guy on LSU's big board here. In reference to Joel Klatt's blank check, do I think that LSU, if things got serious and they started calling their booster base and said, listen, he's interested, but we got to pay, do I think LSU would pony up the money? Yeah. Do I think that things have gotten to a point where massive money donors have even gone to the governor and said, listen, everything you said on Pat McAfee, on at the podium at I don't even remember what he was even there talking about. Was it SNAP benefits? Everything that you said in reference to contracts, conflict of interest, and all of these things that you spoke about, we actually agree. However, it's not the world that we live in. There are things, and we have talked about this as well, that if you remember in the year 2000, LSU set a standard for coaches and coaching contracts, and I do think that they're going to go at it in a unique way yet again. I think Lane sees LSU as the massive sleeping giant. Let me rewind you back to one thing from 2016 before we move forward. Because the truth of the matter was, Ed Orgeron was getting Lane Kiffin in 2016 to be his offensive coordinator. He was leaving Bama. The rumor was at the time that Saban told Jimmy Sexton, whatever you do not allow Lane Kiffin to go to be the OC at LSU. Find him a head coaching job. And what he did. Guys, it's not really rumor. Because now that all of this is passed, and now that Lane has talked about it, and now that all of these things are coming out, and Lane has said, yeah, I was coming until Florida Atlantic called me and gave me an opportunity to be a head coach again, which is ultimately what I wanted. He sees this place different than others. He sees this place as what everyone sees it as. And Lane is a different human being. Do I think money entices him and Jimmy Sexton? Yes, I do. Speaking of Jimmy Sexton, do I think that he's doing a massive job right now for all of his clients? Absolutely. And the one thing that all of you need to know is there's not a better PR person. It does not exist. There is not a better person in running PR in college football better than Jimmy Sexton. Doesn't exist. Let me give you a quick example. Guys, I've been in this game since 2017, started back full-time really in 2019. I build contacts, agent contacts. You know, I do a national college football show, and we have a very close community with agents that want to represent us because there's massive money that is involved in this. I mean, I love them to death, but like, look at the FanDuel deal that we have here. We're proud to be partnered with our good friends over at FanDuel. But I say all that to say you got to understand how these things work, and those agencies will leak something to a guy like Klatt, a guy like myself, a local people to get what they need to get. Guys, LSU is going to go after Lane Kiffin. If he accepts the job ultimately at Florida, then he accepts the job. But the prom queen is not going to go out on a date with you until you ask. And I think that as LSU starts to get their dominoes in line, as LSU starts to get their dominoes in order, let's see how quickly they can align here in these next 2 weeks and really get pushed forward. If you're Ole Miss, do you give Lane Kiffin an ultimatum? Because they can't be left at the altar either. You know, does the regular season ultimately get here and they're at the Egg Bowl and you're in a situation at the Egg Bowl and Ole Miss doesn't want to be left at the altar post-playoff. And they got to start their own coaching search if Lane Kiffin moves on. Because this was always the white whale that you were going to attack. This still is LSU. But the beginning of the week, LSU started having some really hard conversations with themselves. That is sourced. Things were not probably going the way that they thought that they were going to go when this job opened up. And they quickly had to shift. You go to the governor and say, hey, we agree with you on everything you said about these contracts, but we have a chance here to bring the best head coach or one of the best head coaches in college football, but we got to do what we got to do. By the way, your political career could be on the line here. Okay, well, do what you got to do. He's the white whale that you're after. He is the prom queen that you're after. You know, I envision this right now as Lane Kiffin being the prom queen, and there's three guys standing right in front of him. You got LSU, you have Ole Miss, and you have Florida. It's like an episode of The Bachelor, if we're being honest. Who is Lane Kiffin going to give the rose to? And before all of you say, Blake watches The Bachelor. Well, first off, I have a wife. You're damn right when I watch The Bachelor. If I spend time with my wife, she's going to have The Bachelor on, and, well, I'm going to sit there with my wife. Yes. It's like an episode of The Bachelor. Who does he give that rose to? The biggest fear for guys like Florida, for teams like Florida, are that now that LSU is involved in this. Now, let's talk about the Florida side of this before we ultimately end with LSU things and things that I've actually heard behind the scenes on this. Guys, there's a lot of confidence coming out of Florida when it comes to Lane Kiffin. A little bit too much confidence, if you ask me. Doesn't mean that the confidence isn't real. Doesn't mean that he's not going to the University of Florida, because he very well could. But right now, I don't think Lane Kiffin knows if he's going to the University of Florida or not. So any report out there saying, in my humble opinion, that he's going to the University of Florida, I do not believe. I don't believe. What I do think is that Florida is going to go all out in this too, because they are. Guys, I look at Florida in a situation, and the way that I see Florida is it's a really freaking good job. Is it better than LSU when LSU is humming? No, it's not. Their fans would disagree. Of course they would. We would disagree, because of course we would. But when you take it from the 50,000 level of view, the mountain high view, we don't have another P4 team in this state. The recruiting base of what you have here is a lot better. And they know that, because three P4 teams, along with USF, UCF, that are fighting, which, by the way, UCF is another Power 4 team that people forget about. There's 4 Power 4 teams in the state of Florida that ultimately you got to compete against. Louisiana, you don't. What I feel about the Florida confidence, it kind of feels a little too much to be true at the current moment. It feels a little bit like, to me, in 2021, when everybody kept saying that that Lincoln Riley was coming to LSU. Remember all that level of confidence? Remember everybody saying Lincoln Riley has accepted a $100 million deal to LSU. A lot of confidence was coming out of LSU about Lincoln Riley. Same feels to be going on at Florida. But one thing I've learned in coaching searches, the teams that have the most confidence shouldn't. I don't think Lane Kiffin knows. And I do not believe, in my opinion, regardless of where it's sourced, how can it be sourced if Lane Kiffin doesn't know? And I don't think that Lane Kiffin knows. Nor do I think that he would tell anybody right now that he has accepted a job. Lane Kiffin, when I look at the University of Florida in this situation, they hold all the leverage. They hold all the power. Why would they accept it right now? Meaning, why would Jimmy Sexton tell Lane Kiffin to accept the job at Florida when they hold all the power? So here comes LSU. What does Florida counter? Do they counter? Does LSU counter the counter? And that number go up, which is all Jimmy Sexton wants. You know that, and I know that. Florida does, they are breeding confidence that Lane Kiffin has accepted the job. I don't know if I'm there yet. But regardless if that is true or not, one thing that I think we all know is he ain't signed on the dotted line. So this thing isn't over with yet. So let's get to the LSU side of things. Guys, it seems to me that LSU made some pretty big moves over the last, let's just call it 12 hours. As things started picking up, meetings started picking up, LSU started making moves, and he's not the only one. If you remember last night, we did about a 9-10 minute segment on Marcus Freeman, who I do think is going to be on that list, as we talked about last night. Now those reports are starting to come out. I think that you're going for the white whale. If you missed, you miss. But the things that I have heard is that you're going after him. We'll see. Because I don't know if he's going to be the next head coach of LSU or not. I don't. What I do know is it's not stopped LSU from attacking. Here's what I have heard. And I'm going to be very cautious how we discuss this. The one thing that has been good in all of this, the one thing about all the chaos that has surrounded LSU at the current moment, there has been some fruits of the bad labor. The good fruits of the bad labor is that it seems to have really brought a unification, not at LSU, but the people that care about LSU. Meaning the people that do ultimately hold all the cards here are the people that are going to be giving you the money to get this shit done. There have been meetings in the beginning of the week, and as we talked about on Wednesday on the members-only channel, or the members-only content, that, listen, LSU is going to have to get aligned. They're going to have to really start getting some things in order here, and they got to move quickly. Seems as if that the money organization of this, post Brian Kelly firing, has started to align. Is there more chaos that's going to come of this? I don't know. But I think it's from conversations that I've had, it started to piss off people that do have money. It started to get people that really care about this place to say, hey, guys, enough is enough. Shut the fuck up. We got to go get somebody that can make LSU football great. Be quiet. Shut your traps. What do you need? It seems as if LSU has responded to that in a pretty damn good way. Read into that what you will read into that. But people are getting organized from a money standpoint and saying, what do you want? Okay, you got it. Put it in the contract. Bad fruits have, for once, seemed to potentially have produced some good fruit. Or bad labor has unintentionally produced what might be good fruit. Now, as last night we talked about Marcus Freeman, today we talk about Lane Kiffin. I still think that some of those other guys are on this board here. I know people are saying that Lincoln is not. Guys, Lincoln is going to push to get out of LA. I will source that with everybody. Now, that does not mean when I say that, that's LSU. As I said today with our good friends over at Service Hawk, as I said last night, as multiple people have stated, I do think Lincoln wants out of LA. What does Auburn do? What does Penn State do? What does Florida do? What do you do? Arkansas is going to be left with scraps here. So, as the iPhone continues to buzz over here, no telling what's going on. I do think that Lane is going to be extremely interested. I think he's going to hear all three people out. I don't know if Lane's going to listen to the New York Giants. I don't know that. I can't confirm. I can't deny. But when the time comes, and the time is starting to come now, as these teams want to know who their next head coach is, Lane's going to entertain all three of them. Does he want to leave Ole Miss? I don't think people look at it from the view of only LSU or only Florida or only Ole Miss. It's great at Ole Miss. Guys, I got to be real with you. If you're an Ole Miss fan, listen to this. I got to be a little real with him. No, you're not. You're not LSU and you're not Florida. I love you. No, I don't. But you're not. You deep down, you know that. The game, I keep hearing people tell me that the game has changed. Like the game has changed in reference to, these lower programs are getting into the playoff. You're right. Who's been in the Final Four the last two times that we've gotten it? Who has it been? When you roll back the last decade, who have the Final Four teams ultimately been? You're right. The top 12, teams 5 through 12, will always be a shuffling door. Who was in the Final Four last year? Notre Dame, Ohio State, Penn State, and Texas. Blue Bloods. The year before, who was it? Alabama, Michigan, Washington, and Texas. Now, you could make the argument that Washington's not a blue blood. Okay, fair. But it's still a massive program. So when everyone wants to talk to me about the game changing, and I had this conversation with Tim Brando on Twitter, and he said, oh, man, the playing field has been equaled out, which I don't ultimately disagree with him on the quote-unquote playing field overall being different. However, when I keep seeing the Final Four teams be blue bloods, I start calling bullshit. Oh, it's all evening out until when you get to the Final Four and the blue bloods keep winning. Guys, I think that when you get to the Final Four yet again, it's going to be the same way. The teams that recruit the best, develop the best, and spend the most money are going to be there. You know who else believes that? Lane Kiffin. You know how I know? He said it at the podium on Tuesday. On Tuesday, Lane Kiffin went to the podium and he was asked, which was a fantastic question. When you look at a new program, or you look at any program, not a new program, when you look at a program and you think of a really good job, what do you see? Heisman's, national championships, elite infrastructure, recruiting, blue blood, NIL money. Those were the 6 categories that he listed off. Yeah, Ole Miss doesn't have that. Well, Blake, neither does Florida. Guys, Florida does, whether you want to admit that or not. One thing Billy Napier did do well was he did recruit his ass off. Guys, look at the NFL talent that's on that roster. The simple fact that they didn't win, guys, I could be real with you. I think that they have just as much talent as any SEC team, and when the draft comes, it's going to produce that. They're going to have 8 guys that get drafted. It's going to happen, and they might have, before he got hurt, one of the best freshman wide receivers in the country. The bottom line remains is I fully expect, completely expect, that he's going to listen out to all 3. I do think that LSU is going to open up the checkbook because there's a lot of people pissed off.